You're listening to NFT 365, the first daily podcast on NFTs with your host, Fanzo, talking crypto, blockchain, Web3, non-fungible tokens, metaverse, and...
What the f*** is a non-fungible token?
We'll get to that.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to another episode of NFT 365. We are on to season number 2. And of course, one of the beauties of season number 2 is that we are learning from not only doing a podcast every single day for 365 days, but we're also kind of taking our learnings from, what did we learn buying an NFT every day with the migration of the project and really the different blockchains that we minted on, different interfaces, different marketplaces. And for me, one of my favorite pieces of pretty much everything Web3 is the tech side. And most people know that just based on my background with enterprise tech and just really being a big time geek. And I like to set the stage of for me, part of my fun time of, I would say, especially early emerging tech was, I would get out of my day job and then I would jailbreak my iPhone so that I could have some fun on that side of the house. And so excited for this conversation today. We're going to talk Web3 NFTs, talk about tools, talk about a tool that I just recently became familiar with, and I has some unique components, even a little DeFi and DAO integrated to it. So excited to have that conversation. Seb, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast. Go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience, and we'll get into some questions I got for you.
Yeah, let's do it. First, thank you for having me. Happy to be chatting a bit more about Zapper, my background. A little intro on myself. So I am the co-founder of Zapper. For those that don't know, Zapper is a Web3 explorer where you can browse any account on chain, see what they own in DeFi, NFTs, see what DAOs are a part of. You can see trending NFTs. Our view is kind of, right now we're in the early internet of phase of Web3, where you had Yahoo and search engines. And for a lot of people at that time, it was really hard to parse the internet and travel. You had to kind of, use enter a bunch of domains randomly, or eventually hope that you stumble on a website you're interested in. And so similarly in crypto, it's really hard to discover new things. We rely a lot on traditional social media to do it. And our goal is really to kind of create a better window into what's going on chain, putting that in a format that's much more human readable and accessible to everyone. One of our big focuses is actually not hiding the blockchain, not hiding crypto. It's bringing it closer to people in a language that they can relate and understand.
I love that. We've been joking that, I think, Sam Bankman-Fried definitely taught a lot of journalists what is it like to read Etherscan, right? And the importance of, really the availability of transparency with the blockchain. I'm curious. So from your, your background, how did you kind of get into Web3, and how did the kind of the life of the project kind of come to life for you as far as problems that you were trying to solve?
Yeah, so originally I have a background in finance. I studied in finance. During my degree, quickly became disillusioned with the traditional finance system. I had an internship that was full of red tape, huge conflict of interest between the investment fund and their customers, how they'd actually invest the money. They often chased the highest commissions they could and didn't really care about their customers or their clients. And I became super disillusioned, so decided to learn how to code. And so directly after graduating, decided to learn how to code and got a job as a developer. And kind of fast forward to 2017, I had a few startups, a few jobs as a developer. I discovered Ethereum. I knew what Bitcoin was. Wasn't I understood the political and monetary aspect of it, but being a tinker and a builder wasn't something that was of particular interest. But when I learned about Ethereum, it kind of blew my mind that you can actually build these smart contracts and build extensions to money and a bunch of different applications. And so from that moment, kind of dived really deep into ETH. And in 2019, started to participate a lot in DeFi. So I became really involved in a bunch of different projects. Now the time was a very small kind of market. There's maybe 10 protocols $20 million in total value locked. Like it was minuscule. Like kind of everyone knew each other. And at the time, the biggest problem I had was to track my own portfolio. So I was doing that in a spreadsheet, pulling in data every day and just throwing in there. And then at one point, I'm like, Ethereum is this global ledger. All the information is there. Why don't I just build a website that just reads directly from it and puts my DeFi, investments in a nice format. So that was really the first use case for Zapper, just taking your investments, pulling from a different protocols, putting it into one place. And I just remember putting it in a DeFi Discord, and it kind of was almost like instant product market fit, where I had users trying it out, asking for new integrations, and then from that moment to like today, I'd say like there's definitely like a strong gravitational pull of adding new integrations and servicing more on-chain stuff, and eventually came into servicing NFTs and DAOs and more stuff.
Nice. So yeah, and I mean that DeFi summer and that the DeFi emergence, and I had a very similar path. I was talking about blockchain 2014, 2015 on stages as a speaker, but never really from the crypto side. I don't have the finance backside that you had, but when I figured out smart contracts and Ethereum, that's when that was a big light bulb for me as well. Although you have an interesting background having the finance side as well as the coding side, right? And I think both, all three of those worlds, right, from DeFi, NFTs, and DAO, I think a lot of it was like figuring out, what the hell do we care about? What is out there? What do we care about? What can be manipulated? What is immutable? What is not? I'm curious for you, like, kind of launching into the DeFi side. I think a lot of tools come from front door of NFTs or traditional swapping of crypto. What were some of the things I think early on that, like in the kind of the DeFi discovery of the product, that kind of helped you also see that it could cross over into the NFT world as well?
I remember like after the first few months after launching, already had some users that were like, "Oh, you should add NFTs," and at the time, like I knew what they were, but I didn't see the crossover at all. I was like, this is more of a financial application where you see your investments and you just see like pictures with $0 next to it. Like that's how I kind of viewed them at the time. And so I didn't see the value add. And eventually just users kept asking for NFTs. Could you add NFT support to Zapper at a point where it's really difficult to like ignore? And that's probably leads into early 2021, right as the kind of NFT bull market started, like the first wave kind of started, is when we decided to integrate NFTs. And at the time, like they weren't really kind of financialized. There weren't that many that really had a value. That was one big moment. And then it also came as when we were thinking about Zapper as like, what can this evolve into? And there were really two ways we saw Zapper go. And the first route was like the obvious one. Let's just focus on finance. It's going to be like a mint, .com version of crypto where you just pull in your bank statements and whatever, and it's one place where you track your portfolio, perhaps more like used for taxes and tracking ROI. And the other one, which I felt our team and myself was better equipped, was like servicing on-chain information and putting it in a human readable way. And then another thing I realized was that there's no product except Etherscan that kind of builds around the composability of crypto. Like OpenSea, you go on OpenSea and you just see NFTs. You go on DeFi Llama, it's just DeFi. And all these web apps work in a silo, and it felt like eventually, I'd be curious to see, like, if I went to your account, like that you have DeFi investments and that you care about your NFTs. Like people are much more much more like diverse and serve their interests than like just one sector. They're not boxed into one sector. And part of that as well was, well, so instead of building this portfolio tracker, we're actually building an account profile where we just so happen to start by servicing your DeFi investments. And so once that kind of unlocked in our mind, it became much more natural to add NFTs, even though like obviously a lot of users were asking it. It played like a big role of our strategic direction moving forward.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about like just like we don't really have a single dashboard. I'm a part of multiple DAOs, but I don't think I've ever I've never been I've never used an interface that was going to display that all in kind of one interface, which is very as you say that, it's very funny how we kind of like we siloed ultimately what is still on chain, what is still kind of playing in the same arena. And I think for a lot of people, I know for a lot of our listeners, right, there's the idea of like a marketplace, right, where we have like the the OpenSea and everyone knows Magic Eden, and we have even like the blurs and the rarity trade and trade sniper and a lot of that like buy sell trade, some rarity, some marketplace, and then I think there's others that like I think I've mentioned here on the podcast, like Coin Tracker. I've used Coin Tracker for a good while to kind of that portfolio kind of snapshot, but I've always felt like there was kind of a massive jump between those worlds, right? What the marketplace was showing. I'm curious, like, what was your like? Because like DeFi coming in and kind of adding NFTs and DAO, you're definitely going to have a different perspective on how to display even some of the NFT data, right? Because, unfortunately right now, we are using a lot of vanity metrics like, floor price and, unique wallets where there's so much more data available.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like DeFi has done a better job of like surfacing all of the data and letting people kind of parse it as they want to. How have you had a look at that? Because I think there's so much data on chain that can probably be aggregated. Is it partially like, I guess the question more so is the tech there and the education of the users isn't there yet, or is it the fact that we have the tech but we really don't know which data users are currently caring about, and a lot, especially I could say the NFT space more so than anything else?
I think DeFi is like pretty straightforward because it's like you want to see a dollar amount. Like that's
Right.
the distilled information and you want to see. You want to see like how much you invested in this thing. I think NFTs have a much wider surface of like what they can convey and how you can package them. I think like to some extent, like a lot of marketplaces have that problem too,
Yep.
where like OpenSea is kind of like, Web3 version of eBay.
Yep.
eBay sells a ton of stuff, and then you're trying to build a model that you can show all these different things under like a similar kind of model, but sometimes using a similar model, you lose valuable information like a music NFT. The display or what you want to convey with it is going to be much different than like a PFP. But on OpenSea, like the pages are similar. Like they're
Yep.
and I think there's a big opportunity for like new products to kind of exploit that difference, or like really build in one silo in particular to help with information. For us though, there's a big challenge because we want to show you what you own regardless. I think it'll come to how people kind of consume those NFTs. Like something we were thinking about was like, say for music NFTs, like perhaps I could go on your profile and like I have a dedicated section for music NFTs, but I could also see like when I hop on your profile, like you have a featured song that starts playing or something that gives
Right.
a more depth to your profile. Like I think there's a lot of different ways we can package them versus just like the traditional tiles on OpenSea that you'll see that represents an NFT. But
Yeah.
it's definitely a challenge because the variety it's like a game you can never win because like the variety of NFTs and what they can represent is just infinite.
Yeah, it is definitely all over the map, right? And there's not a, there's are some common variables, right? But I think it's, the eBay, example always is funny for me with OpenSea, right? Because it makes sense, but it's also like anyone that's used eBay, even a couple years into eBay, we all knew that if you were a seller on eBay, you were provided a plethora of tools and information and data and best practices. And then if you were just the buyer, you went onto the dashboard. I think OpenSea has kind of taken buyer and seller, they're all the same. We'll give you just about
Right.
the same amount of info. And I think it's unfortunate, right? Because I think it oftentimes kind of diminishes some of the the value or the implied way of even putting things out there. And I'm curious with your, I went through some of the marketing, some of the articles that you guys have put out. It seems like there's also in the NFT space, you're looking at it from like twofold, right? Where I can create a portfolio and see what my account is worth, but I can also verify what others are holding or what is on what is on their display. I'm curious from that standpoint. How does we know like the hidden folder on OpenSea is I don't want to expose that world to a lot of people yet. In some cases, hey, that's on the blockchain, right? It's part of the piece of the puzzle. How have you kind of looked at that? Like OpenSea takes a lot of liberties with their 2.5 kind of gamification, not truly decentralized, and kind of manipulating some of the public view of people's data. How have you approached that? Do you have a kind of a philosophy or a way of kind of managing on what you show, what you don't, or what you enable, or what you even get some of the users the ability to hide or not hide?
Yeah, it's there's a trade-off, right? We can show everything, but then people will complain that there's spam. And so then we try to build a scalable solution for how we hide spam. And it happens that a lot of the time, like financial data on NFTs is a really good metric for what is spam or not, because if something has never sold before, well, it's much more likely that or it was wash rated through a few accounts that it's spam. Like we can leverage on-chain data for that. The difficulty is all these like actual NFTs that end up getting caught by like our spam filter, and so you constantly need to adjust it, make it better. The other one, which I think is better, is enabling users to more like control over their portfolio and just how they display NFTs. The problem with that is you kind of end up in a situation where you have like Pranksy, where Pranksy is never gonna go through tens of thousands of spam NFTs on their account to like manually hide. So you kind of need to have that spam filter, even like as people discover new accounts. Like you want to be able to consume Pranksy's profile in a simple way, and so it's always like a trade-off between these two things. But I always tend to go to more power to the users and us being as unopinionated as possible. Like we just want to show the chain as is. Obviously, that comes with a few, issues where you have a lot of spam, especially on networks where the gas is much cheaper, like Polygon.
I'm curious, you from a standpoint of like kind of positioning from a a tool set, right? I think for a lot of listeners, they might be wondering, okay, can I buy and sell here? Can I you do have like kind of the swap functionality. How have you approached like not wanting to be a tool for all, but also helping people kind of understand, okay, you're using this tool in this type of scenario. How do you kind of look at that?
Yeah, well, how we see like most people using Zapper for is to see what the hell people are doing, what they own. And like part of like a big feature that we're going to launch is we're going to launch our activity feed, and it's like a generalized activity feed for the entire like blockchain. Like for Ethereum, we're indexing every transaction that's happening, and if I'm following you, well, I'll see what the hell you're doing. And from there, I can say that you bought an NFT. I can click on that NFT. I get like a lot of context around what's going on and where the economic activity is happening. And from there, you can take better decisions on what you want to buy. Or like I think right now, one of the big challenges is what's the top of funnel way that people discover new things in crypto, and a lot of it comes from Twitter, and it's often or social, like traditional social media. Oftentimes that will not necessarily be the best type of information because there's a gap between what actually happens on chain and what people report. And there's also like a time factor. Like sometimes you'll see something much later than you wished, or you just won't see it at all. And it's funny because one of our engineers that works at Zapper, that's actually building the feed, was someone that was really heavy in DeFi, and from using the feed, discovered a bunch of NFT collections that, you know, kind of ignited that interest in NFTs, and then that person started buying NFTs.
Nice.
If they saw it on Twitter, like the context is much richer because you're like, that's where the actions actually happen. You're not like 10 kilometers away on Twitter, far from NFT downtown. Like you're there, you're seeing what's going on, you're seeing who, you see their balances. Like to me, that is like rich context that provides good tools to be able to take better decisions.
I mean, yeah, because I mean, let's face it. I mean, figuring out. I mean, for last year from November 11th to November 11th, I bought an NFT every single day. I researched about from early on, it was 12 to 14 different NFTs, and shrinking it down to one, and we held on to every one of them, right? So we have 365 NFTs, and I used across 30 different marketplace blockchains, pretty much trying to find every unique way of value. Yeah. And without question, the most popular question I got was, how do you find a new project? Because the parameters that I had was it had to be pre-mint. So I minted all of them. None of them were legacy projects. And so that was a nightmare in its own. And for me, a lot of the conversation was like, how do you find up and coming projects? But in a weird way, even existing projects that are of value with holders that we might respect, or we might already follow on social, or we already might look up to, that's also a really nuanced process, right? The amount of like bookmarks that I have on like wallets that I'm monitoring on different different tools or different ether scans, it's really just a geeked out version of us having to go that layer. And so I love that idea of kind of bringing a lot of that data to life. Of course, then you do get into that little bit of like, just because someone owns 12 of them and they have a big wallet, how does that value? So yeah, I'm curious, like, what's your take on, if you had to look like a forecast on it, if you were able to surface data for people to better understand what projects are out there or what projects have current activity, are there certain things that you really want to surface so that it kind of gives a lot of those like kind of, I wouldn't even say buying signals, but maybe trust signals for people when they're trying to buy a project?
Yeah, well, I think the who's part of the project component is important, like who's collecting it. Like if I'm starting to, like when I'm looking at different NFT collections, like I will often look at who collected them, or I'll take my decision based on someone else. Obviously, it's not just that. But oftentimes, like we're social creatures, it's very rare that I happen to just find something without anyone else having, like I'm the first person to discover something. Often you get the signal from someone else. So I think it helps figure out like there's collections on OpenSea that are constantly being wash traded to be at the top of the chart. And it's really hard to parse those accounts and know if they're just flippers or they're just like gaming the system. And so if you get high quality intent from people you follow, or you went out and looked at different accounts, I think that's a great way of doing it. There's also something that we're planning to launch pretty soon as well, which is kind of the same concept as Twitter. It's like lists. So you'd be able to create a list of like really cool NFT collectors, and I'd be able to subscribe to that and then see what that list is doing on chain. And anyone, like it's democratizing, basically anyone can create lists. And so the more we surface, the more we allow people to create tools. Like we don't want to be the ones that decide how you find stuff. Like we want to let people invest in their own kind of experience and share better ways with others of finding the alpha.
Yeah, I like that, because I mean, I know for a fact that many of the listeners here on the podcast have my wallet, bookmarked into a Discord. They're, getting auto posts, because I get the DMs like 30 seconds after if I ape into a project, or all of a sudden I buy back into something that I jumped out of before. I get like all these DMs and screenshots, and I think that's it's a very interesting world, right? Because I do love the nature of the transparency, right? Where people can see, but we also know a lot of that can be it's kind of like people want to be decentralized. Some people like being autonomous and kind of being disconnected from what their actions are. But I think in reality, a lot of that is like not only are we human creatures on that side, but we want to look at kind of a layer deeper. And I like the idea of surfacing that kind of an easier to find or easier to view perspective. I'm curious, you do have DeFi and DAOs kind of listed as well.
Yep.
How are DAOs, like actually I had a call yesterday with it's actually a rather big investment group that has been playing in the DAO space. And for them, they've been really under impressed with kind of like the entire DAO experience, from voting to snapshots to. But I'm curious, from kind of analyzing DAOs. I'm part of the Expansion Punk DAO. That's a one that I've been in since day one, and I saw it listed in that list there. How are DAOs kind of approaching data differently, or how are you able to look at data differently with DAOs? Because I'm not as familiar with monitoring other external DAOs. For me, it's mostly if I'm in a project or someone's coming to me and asking me to be a part of it. I haven't done kind of the other side of it. So I'm curious, just what are some of those like things that you're able to surface for people to better understand like what a DAO is representing?
Yeah, so a lot of there's two things. Like I think DAOs are actually probably among the simplest things to surface, because they're a group of people and a treasury. Sometimes treasury is not like the really important part, but they do have a treasury. So there's like a way they vote. So they have a token, sometimes transferable or not transferable. And so we basically index like who owns that token. So who's a part of that DAO, who has votes in this DAO. And so that's one part. So you go on a DAO page and you see the members. And then the other part is the treasury. And often the treasury is like a group of ETH wallets or like multi-sigs. And so we kind of bundle those all under one umbrella, like under one kind of bundle, to be able to view the DAO. And that kind of came from people kind of looking at DAOs without us explicitly building out a DAO feature. Like people were just we had a bundle feature for a really long time, where you can take like 15 accounts and smash them together and have a view of like the wallet and their DeFi investments and NFTs. And people were just using that to view DAO treasuries. And so we were like, well, let's just take that concept and bring the token ownership concept with it and repackage it into this DAO page. So that's like a good example of us making on-chain information like human readable. So a DAO has multiple components. There's like tokens and there's treasuries that have different investments and different apps. So it's just like kind of building this molecule, like relationship of different things on chain and surfacing it in a way that's consumable. Because otherwise it would just be scattered and siloed on Etherscan.
Yeah, and let's face it, even Juicebox and Snapshot and a lot of those that are out there are very. You almost have to know the DAO you're looking for and know what DAOs are even providing to get a lot of that information out there. You mentioned kind of like building or kind of pulling in the NFT space into the tool during the bull market, the bull run that we had. Of course, we are in the middle of a bear market and have been in a bear market for a while. Are there anything that you're looking at that like kind of, well, as the market turns, for who the hell knows when that actually happens, are there any like features or things that you're kind of identifying as like maybe entry points or things that you believe would probably have helped people a year ago if it existed? But I think we are having kind of a reset there. I'd love to know your take on any kind of nice to haves or entry points that you're kind of looking at from like surfacing it within a tool.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think like my answer doesn't really change through like being able to see what the hell's going on. There's something that's still pretty much unsolved in the space that if we'd have like a year ago, we'd be in a much better position. Because I see a huge difference between crypto veterans like you and me, and people like that browse Etherscan, and people that are entering the space. And people that are entering the space come at a huge disadvantage to like, there's even people that are experts that are just looking at what's in the mempool, like all the pending transactions, and being able to take smart decisions based off of that. Like there's a huge gap, and that gap comes from people's understanding of the blockchain and being able to also read it. And so if we're able to level the playing field for everyone, so build a way so that everyone is able to browse the chain, then that's not as big of a problem. I see so many people falling. Like I saw so many people falling for scams during the bear market because what was reported on Twitter, which was super verifiable on Etherscan, was a world apart. And
Yep.
so I could do my due diligence. I could look on Etherscan and see that the project was rugged or something, or they rugged in the past pretty easily. But people on Twitter or that just coming into the space, they don't have that that knowledge, and so they come at a complete disadvantage, and people exploit that. And so that to me is like the biggest thing that's missing in crypto, and you see it to a bigger extent into how kind of like the general or mainstream media also sees crypto and how they understood the situation with FTX. Like people don't understand.
Yeah.
They kind of mix the concept of a centralized exchange with on-chain and crypto. Like all these things are really messy. And if we can make the tools to actually browse the blockchain easier, I think we'll be able to just make crypto just much more simpler for everyone than just, I don't know how many times I have to like what's a wallet, what's a centralized exchange, what's Coinbase, like all these things are so complicated for someone that's coming in. And yeah, to me, it's still like the what the hell is going on chain is probably the biggest thing, the biggest opportunity right now for people entering.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, I like that when I first pulled up the tool. I like the idea of like, how do we translate that, right? How do we simplify, what is on chain? Also, I think there's an element, right, where we help people, they have to get an exchange to get something into their wallet because we want them to own their keys. Then they buy the NFT on a marketplace, and let's face it, they go and look at their NFT in a wallet, and they're like, what the hell is this? Even if they, that's most recently, right? That we even got a portfolio view. And I think the sad truth was sending people back to a marketplace that is built for buying and selling to view what is in your portfolio is ass backwards and doesn't make any sense in any of the the traditional ways that we would do, right? It's almost like telling people to go look at their bank account on the stock exchange, on a stock market, right? Versus like, wait, why? I'm not buying or selling. And that's actually been a big pushback, for a lot of people that I onboarded, where they're like, Brian, you told me that I should buy these NFTs and hold on to them for 3 years. Why do I have to go look at them on a place that's only built for buying and selling, right? And that was always like I was like, well, hey, that's just kind of where our space goes. So I like that the approach of what you're kind of building there, because it simplifies our view of our own piece of the pie, but it also kind of simplifies that hierarchical view of what is everything actually that is is on chain. Although I went and when I first clicked my portfolio, I have like some Olive Garden NFTs that ended up going into a cease and assist that are still there sitting in my wallet. That I'm like one day they'll have nostalgia, but right now they just look like a massive loss of equity, right? Like that's just how it works.
Wow, that's pretty funny. Well, they're going to be there forever.
Yep.
They're on chain, so yeah.
That's the truth. Well, so, I appreciate you jumping on the podcast. We'll definitely put a link to the tool in the show notes. Is there anything you wanted to leave the audience with? Anything that you have coming down the road that want to make sure that they're aware of?
Yeah. So big feature that's coming is our activity feed. We'll be launching a beta by the end of the year and launching it into production early next year. So you can follow anyone. You can follow Fanzo and see what he's up to in the NFT space. Or what tokens he's trading. We also have a mobile app as well, so you can head to our Twitter. We have all these our important links there to do the exact same things. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.
The conversation.
Thank you for coming on. Yeah, I enjoyed this a lot. And for our audience too, I preach a lot about transparency. This was they had reached out and checked out the tool. I said, hey, let's come on and check it out. There's no relationship beyond that here with the podcast. So of course, do your own damn research. Check out the tools. I love the idea of a mobile piece of the pie. Right now, mobile. I mint a lot of NFTs via my mobile device just because I was buying one every day for a year, and I have 3 daughters and living in that world. And everyone laughed at me because they were like, I can't believe you're minting on your mobile device. And I was like, hey, I got to do what I got to do. And so when I saw you had a mobile app too, I appreciated that as well. And and I think the beauty too is right now we are a lot of impatient, loud, NFT holders. But as we kind of welcome new people back in and we're resetting a culture, I do think it's going to be even more important to be able to hold people accountable, be able to verify what people actually own and what they say they're a part of. And, tools like this are going to be a big part of that. So yeah, Seb, thanks for jumping on the podcast. As always, everyone, thanks so much for listening. And until the next one, make it a great day, my friends. Cheers.
Yes, thank you.